of the trust.
During July 2000, Johnny Lepper, as chairman of the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust, sees his scheme to preserve Rotorua's art heritage start to come to fruition. At the same time as the Trust announces an annual fund to enable the art hunt to become ongoing, John Perry reports back with his first acquisitions to establish the Heritage Art Collection.
This is the sort of work that Johnny really wanted to have repatriated. His original vision was to bring back alive the paintings of the pink and white terraces. And we've successfully done that. But of course the collection is slightly bigger than that original vision. When we wrote the brief actually stated that we were to collect significant works of art that related to Rotorua, the people and the place.
A brief like that meant John's search wasn't just confined to examples like the big-ticket Blomfield works.
The thing about this painting that's really important is that Dr. Wallace was a very famous artist who operated out of Rotorua. He established the Rotorua Society of Arts, and he was really an interesting painter. He worked with John Weeks and Melvin Day out at Nongata, and that little group of artists were amongst the very first artists in New Zealand to paint in a semi-abstract manner. And when you have a look at this painting of Waimangu, you can see there, but when you have a look at it, you realise the colouring is beautiful, the forms are beautiful, the shapes are beautiful. Its size is particularly interesting because it's actually quite a large painting for the modern spirit, and it's a key work. This is a very
and John Perry's art hunt has led him to another sample by the same artist. Dr. Wilfred Wallace was not just an accomplished painter, he was also a very highly regarded medical practitioner and a pioneer in the treatment of poliomyelitis. During the 1920s, he had supervised the running of the King George V Hospital on Pukeroa Hill before going into private practice. Constructed during the First World War years, this facility had originally been intended for the rehabilitation of war wounded, not as a general hospital. Living in Rotorua for pretty much of the first half of the 20th century, anything more serious than basic medical attention meant a trip to Hamilton. The very foundations of Rotorua's modern public hospital service are here in the government gardens, within spitting distance of the bathhouse. This is all that remains of what would be our first permanent purpose-built general hospital, begun in 1938. Foundation work was as far as they got before the project was overcome by the effects of the Great Depression, followed by the war years, a monument to the pre-World War II aspirations of a country town. Following the Second World War, Rotorua was about to become a different place. Great growth in the district was expected. The decision was made to keep the King George site and build new around the old. With a new leasehold agreement concluded with Ngāti Whakāui over the land use on Pukeroa Hill, work began on the facility we are all familiar with today. Beginning with a state-of-the-art nurses' quarters in 1944, major construction work has taken place on Pukeroa almost continuously ever since. But in the year 2000, the news coming from the Hospital Hill is concerning. So far during the year, newspaper reports have clearly indicated that Lakeland Health is an organisation undergoing considerable stress. Then there are letters to the editor decrying the increasingly decrepit state of the old nurses' home, the use of which has been abandoned in the mid-1980s as nurses' training moved to new tertiary institutions like Wairiki. A retired hospital superintendent, Dr. Keith Ridings, as a political activist as well as a medical practitioner, has long been voicing publicly his concerns about the struggling state of Rotorua's hospital.
Well, the trouble is there isn't enough funding to do everything that they're trying to do. And I think you've got to look at what the priorities are. Running a hospital, the priority is to treat people as sick as efficiently and effectively as you can and get the bed out free again. You don't want them coming back again. You don't want a higher readmission rate. There seems to be a big drive to empty the bed as fast as you can, from what I've seen. And I think they're trying to do too much with limited resources.
In fact, by 2000, the whole of the New Zealand public health system is feeling the strain of balancing rapidly increasing costs against services demanded and the staff numbers required to provide those services. Under the more market philosophy of the 1990s, the country's hospitals are now operating as commercial units called Crown Health Enterprises. As such, they are businesses expected to turn a profit. It is a system which seems to be failing.
The red ink flowed too. We were in debt. And Bill English was Minister of Health and took us into dreadful debt. And because we were a business, it was user pays, and you had to turn it into returning a profit to the Crown. It was crazy. It was health. It was a public service. That galvanised me in politics more than anything else. Having worked in the hospital where I just saw that we were resource starved, and we also had doctors against management. They'd brought in this so-called generic management that would sort it out as if we were the post office, and we weren't. We were a hospital.
Rotorua Hospital would face more challenges in the immediate future as the incoming Labour government began to look at how to introduce a new era to the country's health services. One affected by early administrative changes was Glynis Sarank.
And the Labour government came in and immediately sacked the area health boards, and I was on that area health board, which head office was in Te Puke, and we covered Tauranga, Whakatane, Taupo and Rotorua. So it was a very hard working board. It was working very well, but unfortunately Auckland and Wellington area health boards were not functioning well. They were running over budget, they had really, really big problems, and the Labour government, Helen Clark, wiped all the area health boards for the sake of 2 that were misperforming. And so we went then to the district health boards, and we saw the split of Tauranga out from Rotorua and Rotorua on its own with Taupo.
Away from the problems of the hospital at the other end of town in August 2000, the mood is all positive, as both local newspapers have called the completion and opening of the first stage of Rotorua Central Mall.
You'll notice that next to it, the city is still open and a vibrant walkway and pathway.
Progress has not been without hiccups, like the failure of the intended flagship supermarket. American owners of Costumes have found their bulk buying style of operation has not worked in the New Zealand environment. But the mall has also brought new players to the Rotorua marketplace.
Association, the way that we're working together, the friendliness and the trust that has evolved between the parties has been quite outstanding.
And the opening day is a celebration for Malcolm Short, Pukaroa Orua Whata, Ngāti Whakawe and the District Council.
Declare this shopping mall open.
The Rotorua mood of optimism is buoyed by additional news. With the assistance of extra funding from the Energy Charitable Trust, the construction of the new Community Arts Village has received the go-ahead. Also to proceed is a redevelopment of the International Stadium grandstand, despite ballooning costs. One Daily Post editorial comes with what could be a prophetic warning: that Rotorua will have to deliver better attendance numbers to rugby events than in the past, or risk losing out to the growing market power of Tauranga's burgeoning population growth. To a certain extent, local spectator interest depends on the fortunes of the Bay of Plenty Steamers, once again playing second division in this year's NPC competition. To be promoted to the all-important first division with the high-profile teams, it's a competition they have to win. At the start of the season, Craig Tiriana produces a profile of the Steamers coach, Gordon Titchens.
Yeah, very focused man, Gordon. Passionate Bay of Plenty person. Used to play rugby here in Rotorua, you know, played at Mara St Michael's before he went over to Tauranga in his club rugby days. Played for the Bay, Sevens guru, you know, at this point. And, you know, he'd been in the Bay's chair for a long time. And he had had a few cracks at it and they'd come close. And he was probably as focused as any of those players were that they were going to somehow get out of that division.
So as the roof comes off the old International Stadium grandstand and work begins, there are hopes and prayers in some quarters not only that the investment of a $5 million upgrade will bear fruit, but that the whole thing will be ready for the opening game in March 2001. It's September and spring is in the air. Apart from the displays of rhodos and camellias, how do we know this? According to the Daily Post, it's from a Rotorua oddity called Herman. Like the famous American groundhog, whose appearance from hibernation announces the beginning of springtime, Herman the tortoise similarly awakes from his winter sleep and rejoins the Hoyle family.
Well, we imported Herman from the Welsh Mountain Zoo, and people laugh because of the name Herman, the fact that she's a she, but the actual correct technical name is Testudo hermani, which is the reason that we called her Herman. And we got an import license for her, so she's quite legal, and we brought two of them in, Herman and Sherman, but Sherman died shortly after arrival, which was a pity. But she's very content. She tries to get out of the run. If we put her on the lawn, she's gone in a couple of minutes. You've just got to keep your eye on her all the time. She's been found up in Springfield Road, down at the Linmore shops, so she's had a variety of escapades. We've had her for 50 years, and we bought a mature tortoise so she could be anything up into the 90s.
As usual, during 2000, the Mayor and the Rotorua District Council have gone through the annual exercise of setting rates. Among the many services funded from rates is Tourism Rotorua, the Council's marketing arm, but it's an area which is starting to be seriously challenged by fresh promotional efforts from other regions around the country.
In the early days when we started looking at this whole business of promotion, we were well out in front of the rest of the field. In fact, I venture to say we were probably leading New Zealand by quite a long mile. However, it didn't take long for them to catch up. We were the first to advertise on TV, for example, you know, as a destination. In tourism, everybody thought, wow, we were the first to advertise, come to our city for your conventions and your gatherings, annual meetings. But it didn't take long for the rest to catch up.
Typically, there have been stern questions asked about the degree to which ratepayers are expected to fund the district's tourism marketing and promotion. This year, the council have allotted just under $1 million to market Rotorua. Rural and lakeside ratepayer groups particularly are complaining.
So we're not involved in tourism. Don't tell us pay. Don't ask us to pay because we're not involved in tourism.
But Mayor Hall would rather see a healthy visitor industry than some of the alternatives.
1 in 5 people are employed in the visitor industry, and we went through a period of huge unemployment. So when people talk about the visitor industry or tourism, as some people say, I have some sympathy with them because it does provide jobs, and it provides jobs in the areas where we most need them, and that is with a lot of unskilled people, because you can train them. You can train people, young people, in the visitor industry much easier than you can in some of the high-tech industries.
This year the city has been able to celebrate the success of local visitor attractions at the prestigious National Tourism Awards. A revitalised Rotorua Museum wins 2 of them, while Kiwi Packer scores for its backpacker accommodation. But there is no doubt that Rotorua the destination is starting to feel the effects of its own success. Other awards have come Rotorua's way. For the 2nd year running, we've been voted New Zealand's most beautiful city. And 2000 is also the year that the Rotorua business community really starts coming to terms with the possibilities of the internet as a marketing tool. And with a fanfare, the District Council unveils Rotorua's own website.
I think websites in general were something that the tourism industry was catching up with. It was very much seen as, in the early days, the only e-commerce that really got done on websites was eBay and Trade Me and those sorts of things, and getting real-time tourism booking engines sorted. A lot of that had to catch up or wait for technology to catch up, so that it could automatically sync with people's own systems and so forth. So I think initially the way that the internet worked for a lot of the tourism sector was, first thing was you needed to have a website because you needed to be seen. But then all that was used is almost like an electronic brochure. And people didn't really understand the power of e-commerce and everything else till later.
But there is plenty enough news on the downside to keep our feet on the ground. With the national moratorium on new casinos expiring in October, there is a fresh round of lobbying by Rotorua casinos and their American partners to achieve their goal. Maureen Waka has expanded her anti-casino campaign to include the growing number of poker machine outlets. Together with the growing impatience by some over the lack of progress with airport expansion plans, has come the news that Air New Zealand will cease all jet aircraft operations through Rotorua in October as they phase in a new generation of 737 airliners. Then there is Rotorua Hospital, where the bad news just keeps coming. Like the rest of the country's hospitals, Rotorua is suffering from a serious shortage of nursing staff, causing elective surgery to be cancelled, with the waiting list growing ever longer. And the old nurses' home is back in the news, as vandals cause further deterioration to the building's condition inside and out.
I'd come in after a decade of bad news at the hospital, that the paper ran a bad news story every day, and in the end we employed a communications manager to help us get the hospital out of the front page of the paper.
It became very fashionable to have your own PR person, or spin doctor, whatever one would like to call them. There's always still a battle with organisations, and I'm thinking particularly of the council or the district health board, to get an instant response, because one always has to go through a spin doctor and 25 channels and they come back with the answers. So not necessarily has it been any faster to get a response from these organisations.
Compounding the difficulties of news gathering has been the fact that Lakeland Health, as a Crown Health enterprise, was deemed a private company and thus able to hold its board meetings away from public scrutiny. The new district health boards will be bringing a new era of public openness, but not just yet. An interim board will run things for the best part of a year, until the next local body elections in 2001. These are difficult times for Kathy Cooney, Manager of Nursing Services, promoted to Acting Hospital CEO.
Yes, they were extremely difficult times. We actually came very close to having to stop offering surgery services because of a shortage of anaesthetists, and it did become critical at the end of 2000. So yes, it was all known to me, and we were in deficit. Nationally, the system was under enormous pressure at that time.